basic pottery things is a sponge, because you need lots of water for throwing pottery. Another basic tool is a needle tool. This is good for if something gets too tall, you can cut off the top of it. It's also good for any bubbles that you find when you're throwing, because that distorts the clay and you want to pop those as soon as you can. This is called the metal rib of death because it is very sharp, but it is for helping you shape something because you can bend it, but then it also helps smooth things off and then take off any of the really sloppy clay on the outside, and it'll help it dry more evenly. If you're throwing anything like a taller, skinnier vessel, once you've thrown it to what you want, it's really hard to get your hand back down in there and soak up the water that's in there, because that will make the clay soggy. So this is a nice little tool that I made. It's a sponge on the end of a stick, and you can just put it down in the bottom and soak up all that water so that it doesn't ruin it. And obviously, a good bucket of water for throwing, because you need water to throw, and we like ice cream, so I use ice cream bucket. So then first we're going to take amount of clay. I've got 1 pound 4 ounces because I'm going to throw a mug. Try to aim for the middle. You always slap it down. I see a lot of people slap it down, or you just put it down and just tap it a couple of times. Get your hands wet. And then what you do first is you're going to want to center the clay. Get it all into the middle, all proportioned, so that you aren't going to have something that does this. So first doing that, get it wet. Stick to the wheel, you're just going to push down. Once it's stuck, you're going to do what's called coning up. You're going to bring the clay up. That's coning up. Coning down, you're going to push down, kind of keep one hand steady and push this down into your hand to try to get it to start going to the middle. And then you just go up and down as many times as you need to finally get it all in the middle. Still got a little wiggle in it, so just go up a little bit again. And back down. That's in the middle. After you've got it centered how you want it, I usually do it just about this size for a mug. And then you're going to do what's called opening the clay. You just start with a little hole, add some more water, and then push down. It takes a while to learn to where you've got a good enough pull down there. You don't want to go too far and go all the way down, because then you've got a tube and not a mug. And then you're going to slowly make the opening a little bit bigger on the bottom. About where you want the bottom of your thing to be. Flatten it out as best as you can. And then the next part is what we call pulling the walls. You get your hands wet again. You're going to have a hand on the inside and the outside. I like to use my knuckle here. We're just going to push in, move the clay up. Like that. You want your walls even so you can move at a slow enough pace that you're getting at least one rotation every time you move your hands up. Then I push the bottom in a little bit to get the bottom to where I want it to be. And we're going to pull the wall up again. In the basics of pottery, you're learning to throw a cylinder. Once you can throw an even cylinder, you can kind of pretty much make any shape you want with it. This tool is something you use to trim at the wheel, or just kind of take off any excess clay that you don't want there. So there's this little piece here that I don't want, so I'll just use this, trim it up a little bit, and then take it off. And then make sure our walls are even, make sure everything's wet. And then we use our metal rib of death to help shape. This is when I start getting my curvy shape for my curvy mugs. It also helps take off a lot of this wet clay on the outside. It helps it dry more evenly. And come back out. And I like to make the lip nice. And then because there's still a lot of water from the water I used, I use my little thing here, suck up all the water on the inside. After that, get your hands kind of cleaned off. And then we use this wire tool that we use for cutting the clay, either off the wheel or from the package to get what we want. Hold it tight, hold it against the wheel, slide it through. Sometimes I do it more than once just in case. And then towel, dry it off. These guys. And then with practice, you can take it off the wheel. Just grab it. Hold up. Ta-da. This is called a Griffin Grip. It is a helper tool that I like to do because if I'm going to do a lot of multiples of something, I can quickly just grab a piece, twist it, and it centers it for me because this has to be in the center for me to trim it. Otherwise, it's going to be oblong and off. Otherwise, if I didn't have this, I would tap it on the wheel until I got it centered and then use pieces of clay to hold it down, which I used to do. But then I went to this. Some potters think it's cheating. I don't care. It works. For trimming, you use a loop tool. I like this one a lot. Most standard pottery kits come with this one. So you've got your loop for anything curved, and then your straight edge to try and flatten your bottoms and things like that. I also use the metal rib of death for trimming to smooth things out and make it so it's not going to be rough when people are handling it. The other thing that I use is my maker stamp, which gives my mark on the bottom, so if people want to remember who made it, that'd be me. Alright, so I'll use this one. So we'll get started. So I'm going to trim at the foot here, so let the curves line up with the rest of the way that I've thrown it. And I just blend the line in. And I want the bottom to be evenly where I want it. And then I use the corner of this to mark where I want the foot to start.
And this has been after it's been dried for 24 hours?
At least 24 hours. Every clay has a different consistency to it. Some take less time to dry, some take more, and you kind of just have to monitor it. You can slow it down if it's getting dried towards bedtime. I throw plastic over it so it doesn't get too dry for me to trim. Trimming it when it's too dry is not fun. It's very dusty. And then just want to trim the bottom over here. Get an indent to it. Sometimes I make it super flat. Sometimes I leave the swirl end so people can understand that this was made by somebody's hands. I like this one for the bottoms too, just because it's a wider stance, and so I can get that flat much easier. Trimming also helps take some of the weight off the piece, so it's a nice light mug that you aren't going to have to lift weights to use. And then use this guy just to smooth it and just make it really nice. Smooth the foot. It's not going to scratch your table. maker's mark. Most makers have their own individual mark. That's it for trimming. It looks like a mug. It's ready for a handle.
Okay, so what are you doing here?
This is called wedging the clay. It gets everything to mix all together, but then it also pops any bubbles that might be in there. Well, hopefully we get them all, but you can always get them all. So if there's anything that's a little bit softer or anything that's a little bit hard, this just homogenizes it. Getting out those pesky bubbles that will pop on the edge. And then I'm going to make it into a potato shape, and we will taper one end to make handles. There's plenty of ways to do handles. Some people use an extruder, like a pasta extruder, and they'll have a certain shape that they extrude it. This is called pulling handles, where you'll use water and kind of pull the clay to the shape you want. So you get your clay wet and your hand wet, and start by thinning the clay towards the end. Try to make a consistent shape. I'll use my thumb and smooth down any ridges. At this point it's round, so I'm going to kind of put an oval into my hands and try to get it more of an oval-y shape. And then I'll use these two fingers to flatten it out a little. And at this point, then you can just use your creativity and do, there's all kinds of ways to do handles out there. I like having a little thumb spot here. Once you get it to about the length you want, get this little weird thing on the end, I just pinch it off. And then the side of the table works best for me. I just pull it off, and then I'll curve it to let it set up. Okay, so for attaching handles, I have this fun little tool. It looks like a little rake, but it's got little rasps on the end of it, so it'll help rough up the clay. So when you are attaching clay pieces together, you're going to do what's called slip and score, or score and slip. So when you scratch up the clay where you want to attach part of your handle, you're going to score it. And then I'll go straight down, where I'm going to attach the bottom of the handle, and I score that. Slip is just watered down clay, which helps things kind of adhere together. So I'll just take some of this sloppy clay from my bucket and just get it wet there. And that can chill out. And I will grab a handle that looks appropriately sized. And actually I need this other tool. This is just a little blunt knife sort of thing where I can decide where I want to cut this off at. In general, cut it at an angle on the top. And then we'll score this as well. As well. And then we have the mug and the handle, and we're going to press and kind of wiggle a little bit until you kind of feel it kind of fuse together. And then you look and make sure you've got it straight. And then you see what kind of curve you want to have. And that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to use my thumb. Kind of do that. I'm going to use this to cut off the bottom a little bit. And then I'll smooth where it attaches with my finger. It helps you get your finger wet, so you can just smooth it all out. Nice and attached. You can use your brush as well. Kind of clean up around the joins. Make it look nice. And that's a handle. I found a company. I like their glazes. And they send it to me in a powder form. And then I have to mix it with water and then test the viscosity, basically just how viscous it is or unviscous it is. Each glaze has a certain thickness it needs to be for it to work right. So this is a glossy black. And then I will take my bisque fired mug, which is fired once to 1945. So it is still porous, so it will absorb the glaze. Use my claw and hold it. And then we dip it in the glaze. This one I know I need to leave in there a little bit. You learn by feel and by trial and error. And because the clay is so porous, it will dry on there very quickly. Usually on the bottoms, I will wax it, so then the glaze just runs off the bottom. But if not, you can just grab a sponge. Because if we have glaze on the bottom when we fire it, it will stick to the kiln and not bad. Just like that, the glaze is pretty much dry already. This glaze that is just hasn't been fired yet, this looks like a dusty gray. Once it is fired, it will turn into this glossy black. That's like this. This one has other glazes layered on top, which is why it looks like this, but this is what that would look like.
Well, I look forward to doing more with you because this has been an amazing and very, very cool learning how to make a curvy mug. Stay tuned for
Your next project.